Welcome everybody to another episode of the Pateo radio talk show. The guest of tonight is Stelios Tapinakis, and I've heard him talk on the American Freedom Radio with Santos Bonacci. That show was recorded on June the 9th of this year, and I was really flabbergasted by so many important things that Stelios said there. So I was really eager to get him on the show, and I'm really happy that he accepted the invitation. So I welcome you very much to this radio talk show, Stelios.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Johan.
Yeah, to me it's an honor that you're here, but let's start with the show. Can you please, for the listeners, introduce yourself so that they have a little bit of an idea who you are?
Well, I look just like everybody else, but I'm coming to the conclusion that I'm just visiting here, taking notes to be as objective as possible, and to perhaps help others on the way, if that's possible.
Yeah, exactly, because everybody is responsible for their own journey, but somehow it can be helpful to give some ideas or some directions. But it's not your responsibility to help others. That's what I see too. In that talk show with Santos, you mentioned a lot of things. Can we start with the fact that you mentioned that there is no real basis for, I think everything we have in this so-called world. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, the concept of having an organization or having a body of knowledge or having something material, even something such as money or law that affects the material world, must be based on something. In other words, whether it is a body of knowledge or something physical if it's material, or what have you. Mm-hmm. Now, we have the systems, when you debase a system, in other words, you pull from under it the foundation of a building, let's say, or you pull from under it the knowledge base that supports the system, whether, again, it's an organization or law or anything, medicine, science, religion. You now have what's called a debased system, you see.
System without a base.
Yes. Yeah. And in a debased system, you create a mixture between what is real and what is brought in that can no longer be described by laws that reality follow. You see. Mm-hmm. So by looking at pretty much everything across the board, because we need to look at how everything is connected, right? And then we look to see what makes things different. But we always find that everything is so connected that everything is really the same. And across the board, I have found out that almost everything that man interacts with right now, whether it's a religious institution, monetary, medical, scientific, social, it's in the realm of, like we said, debased. It is not backed by anything, and I would introduce the element of hypocrisy as well, is something that people should consider, where you say one thing but do another, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Give you an example. Like the religions of the world are organizations, and when you examine these organizations, they immediately show you a text that they supposedly base the religion on, some ancient text or a prophet or a god or what have you. And when you actually go look at the text that they allegedly are subscribing to or adhering to, you will find they're doing the opposite or disregarding it entirely. Or what they do is they pick and choose a few things and use it out of context. You see, mm-hmm. And the same thing I found out with the monetary system. The same thing with the medical system, the same thing with the scientific system. And to go as far as even to say mathematics. Outside of using mathematics for commercial means, for let's say quantitative means when you're counting or doing commerce, it falls apart very quickly as well because, for example, they have the concept of zero. Can you show me anywhere in the universe where there's zero, meaning nothing? You can't. There's something everywhere. Yeah. So maybe zero is an equilibrium point. You see? So again, what are we basing it on? Because you ask 7 billion people what does zero mean, they say nothing.
It's probably true. Yeah.
But you can't show me anywhere in the universe where there's nothing. So once we go back to looking at the base of what these systems are based on, one will find you'll be alarmed, you'll be disappointed. I used to say that you need not visit a madhouse to meet disorderly minds because the earth is the madhouse of the universe. And I found out that was a quote. I've been saying this for a long time, but I found out that was a quote from Goethe. When I found out he had already said this almost 300 years ago, I was both happy and upset. I was upset because I thought I was being original, but I was happy, at least I felt like I was in good company.
That's the German philosopher Goethe, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yes, so you then you have a choice, because the truth will not make you happy, I tell people. And what is truth? If we look at how to rationalize a system or a body of knowledge, and within that system or body of knowledge again, there is an intent to adhere to a particular body of knowledge or subscribe to a work, one must follow that. Just like in a construction site, you follow the plans of the architect, in terms of how the building should be built. So we have a debased system across the planet. And how do you reckon that with what is going on? How do you find a midpoint, and how do you communicate this? Well, information, I found out, just giving information is not very helpful, even though it's good if the information is valid and based again. But it's not good if the recipient doesn't have, let's say, an operating system to run the information. Just like a computer, you need an operating system before you run. Yeah,
it has to be compatible. That's what you're trying to go ahead, I think.
Yes, compatible, but compatibility also is achieved within the operating system, because the operating system will have protocols and programs to send something that's incompatible. I'll give you an example. One way to really help people is to have them use already what they have. They don't have to go out and get anything else, you see. Mm-hmm. In other words, they already have achieved everything they need. You see, there's nothing more empowering than showing someone that they already have everything they need. It's not out there. You already have it. For example, I tell people everyone has the same intelligence. Again, just like the computer, if you go to a warehouse with 1,000 computers and they all have the same specifications, they all have the same ability, you see? Mm-hmm. The difference between people is their ability to perceive and discern the information. Some of the texts say those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. Mm-hmm. And then you have discernment. Is this valid? Is it invalid? Is it good or is it bad? So a lot of the initial approaches I have are, for example, to let people think. You see, there's an old saying: you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him think. The saying is really
drink or think.
Think. See, they say the old saying is you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Yeah. But don't worry about making him drink. He's going to get thirsty eventually. The question is, can you make him think? Because he can go from cradle to grave without thinking. Mm-hmm. You're going to get thirsty in the 70 or 80 or 100 years you're on this planet. But will you be able to actually think?
On your own.
On your own and with others. It's important to also think with others. It's called an assembly, because through the counsel of the multitude comes wisdom. So, like for example, I'd start and say, when you heat or cool a room indoors, the heat always goes to the ceiling and the cold always goes to the floor. So all year round you have a hot head and cold feet. But when you're outside in the low elevation, when it's hot, you go up towards the mountaintop or into an airplane towards the sun that is allegedly a heat source. It gets colder and colder. Because could it be in nature that heat becomes dense and it goes down and cold is rarefied and it rises? Mm-hmm. Have you ever you see? This is a secret, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same we see with the corona. The corona is much more heated, up to 20 million degrees Celsius, for instance, compared to the surface of the sun, which is only about 5,500. So it's strange that if it is really a source of heating, then the further away, the hotter it becomes, which is totally understandable. Are you still there, my friend? I don't hear him. Okay, what shall we do? Yeah, it's a good idea because we're in the middle of something, and yeah, I can elaborate a little bit on it, but yeah.
Yes, I'm back. It says here I have a problem with Skype.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, let's
try
again.
Yeah, please continue where you stopped, if you remember where the discontinuation started.
Yes, we have a natural phenomenon, let's say, where natural and artificial heat go in opposite directions. Mm-hmm. For example, you've heard of a question and answer, multiple question answer test where you're given the question and you're given 4 possible answers and you have to pick one. Mm-hmm. Now, if you've done your homework, you'll see the right answer, and let's say A, B, C, or D. One of those is correct, but you'll also notice that some of the answers that are incorrect next to the correct answer are structured so they seem correct, but they're not. You see? Now, if you haven't done your homework, you'll guess, and then you're into the guessing game, and now you're wondering, are you going to look over to see who has the right answer? Or is it a good idea to do some homework? Another example would be the multiple choice question and answer example would be septem means 7, octo means 8, novum means 9, and decem means 10. Mm-hmm. And everyone is writing December as 12, and it means 10. They're writing November as 11 when it means 9. They're writing October as 10, it means 8. Mm-hmm. And they're writing, you see? Now, is that a multiple choice question and answer test? Question, you see.
It could be, yeah. Yeah, but originally the month of March was the first one, and that's why February has the least amount of days. It was the remaining month, so to say.
Yes, but also there's the possibility that can you even keep time with that calendar? Could it be possible that calendar is a work schedule? For example, pick a day like April 30th. On one year it's a Monday, the next year it's a Tuesday, the next year it's a Sunday. So is April 30th a Monday, Tuesday, or Sunday, or is it neither?
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, I have to.
You see.
Yeah.
Another example would be, let's say in science, I ask people, why does a bucket of water weigh more than a bucket of air? According to their periodic table, water, if it's H2O, has a molecular weight of 18. Oxygen being 16, hydrogen being 1. And air has a molecular weight of 28.5 or 29. Now, many people say, well, because of one is a liquid state in the phase, but they're not listening. This is a molecular weight, just one molecule. It doesn't matter what phase it's in. And if you don't believe that, you can go to the welding shop where they have the compressed air cylinders and weigh one cylinder when it's empty and then weigh it when it's full of liquid air, and you'll see there's very little difference. So maybe is it possible that water is not H2O? That not much research on this has been done since a man named William Grove in, I believe, 1811 took 2 metal plates, put them in water, put electricity through, and saw hydrogen, oxygen gas coming out of the water, and that was enough? So if you know not much progress has been made on this since 1811, how easy would it be to start researching water from an objective point of view and make some serious advancements if no one's looked at it in almost 300 years or 200 plus years? It's very easy, you see.
Okay.
So there's many aspects. That would be a scientific aspect, but there are social aspects that are more important that perhaps people can grasp much easier. You see.
Yeah, well, one of the things you said in that radio show with Santos, which was very intriguing to me, you say that the aging process is created by warmth, by heat. So, can you explain what you were trying to say then?
Yes, well, the aging, it's not just heat, you see, because there's a cycle between heat and cold. You have cold, and then cold becomes warm, and then it goes back to cold, and then heat comes from cold. Mm-hmm. And then it goes back to being cold. For example, you can have some wood, or some oil, or something, you can touch it, it's cold, room temperature or lower, and you ignite it, you have fire, and then once the fire is consumed, everything cools down again. And what's left goes back to feed the soil, which can feed the tree, another tree grows, and you start the process over again. So you have the cold going to heat, back to cold, and then there is a biological process on the planet that completes the cycle. It's almost logarithmic. You have very close cycles, and then the next part of the cycle is stretched out much longer. If man understood the vegetative layer on the earth, he would understand the earth itself and science and have real science. Not that the science that we don't have is real. It is real. And I believe on one of your talks you mentioned the science without spirituality. Mm-hmm. And may I offer another point on that?
Yeah, please do.
Spirituality is something you cannot avoid. The science that is present today is very spiritual. The thing to do, though, is can you discern what spirit it is following? You see, when you start speaking of these things, people think that it's a matter of religion. Well, religion is a term that just means something that you do devoutly with regulation, with regularity. Okay? We do many things religiously. We get up in the morning, we get dressed, we go to work, we do things like that. That is a religious act, believe it or not, because it's done frequently and it's done with regularity. When you look into the spiritual realm, there's a lot of confusion because, again, there lacks the foundation. It's been debased. One of the things I like to offer to people is consider when you look at the ancient texts of the world, let's say we call the book they call the Bible, mm-hmm. and then you have other texts, and let's just use the Bible as a reference because it is the most common one. You have the three aspects of the body, which would be, you see the physical body, which is the flesh, or the carne in Latin, or carne. Mm-hmm. You have the soul, which is the breath, and then you have the spirit, which is the intangible essence and personality and characteristic of the being. And the example would be, for example, you have the body, which is the flesh component. Now, the next component for the flesh component to live is the soul. The soul is nothing more than the breath. If you look in the Hebrew, it's the nephesh, and in the Greek it would be called the pneuma. That's where you get the pneu prefix, where you get pneumonia or pneumatic. Mm-hmm. You see? So when, for example, when the body dies, the soul dies. For example, another example would be if someone drowns in water and you pull the body out and they're not breathing, they don't have a soul. Now you resuscitate them by putting your breath into their body, and now they start breathing again. Now they have a soul. We've mystified the soul when it is nothing more than the breath. Now this is not my opinion. This is basically what I'm reporting on what I found out. And it goes contrary to the interchangeability of the term soul and spirit. They use it in the same way, and it's not.
No, I fully agree with that, yes.
Yes, now the spirit is the intangible aspect. For example, if I gave you a DVD with a movie or one of your lectures on it, you see a plastic disc, circular, metallic, with grooves in it. If you gave that to a material scientist, he would give you a report on its weight, diameter, and material content, but he will not see it's one of your lectures on a DVD unless he plays it in some equipment that is compatible to read the information or the interferometry that's on the disc. You see? Mm-hmm. So the spirit is intangible because it's primary. It still is tangible. See, people very often use the term energy in the New Age movement. They say, well, that's materialistic. I deal with energy. Well, energy is still materialistic. Primary forces are not part of the materialistic or energetic world. They're primary. And that is something that has been put away by science.
Yeah, you call them the primary vital forces, or the forces of life. Are these also the 5 elements, or is that related to them, or how do you see that, Stelios?
The 5 elements are manifestation, and the energy from the elements are manifestation. It's interesting when fire is considered an element in the alchemic or partial alchemic texts, because really the information that's out on the market today, especially the internet on alchemy, is very heavily redacted and censored. Is fire a material or an element? Or an energy or a element, you see. So they're the same. When you see light, visible light, that is material. All of your energies are still within the materialistic realm. The primary forces produce the material and the energies. Mm-hmm. Okay, the primary forces are responsible for if you were to get up from your chair and walk across the room. Ask any scientist what does that. How it allows you to breathe. What allows, how does a plant grow? What is growth? You know, what keeps the earth rotating in space? You see, these are primary. So if you eliminate the primary element in any field, whether it's law, medicine, or science, now you're dealing with the symptom, the cause. And you go into the realm where reproducing things become mysterious, right? You see, because now you don't know the actual cause. So there's a lot of literary mechanisms and a lot of literary terms that reflect the primary forces or primary let's call them forces, because they are a force. They're very powerful in a very subtle way. And all of these things that we manifest or see manifest as energy and matter are secondary. So when you go back to the ancient texts, very often there's a misinterpretation, again, between the soul, the spirit, and the body, the primary, and the secondary, which is energy and matter.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I try to explain that using the famous allegory of the cave by Plato, where he talks about that we perceive only a shadow world, and those shadows are projected by something in front of that. I call it the proto-world, the world that is in front of the so-called real world. And I think what you mean by the vital forces, the primary forces, they are the forces in the proto-world. We are not able to perceive them or have equipment that can detect them, but they in fact create everything. And our science is not aware of that, the universities, and that's why they can't really explain anything. They can only describe. But they describe it in such a way that most people think it's an explanation, but that's really a trick to put sand in people's eyes. So that's the main problem. They focus not on where everything is really coming from. So I think we're on the same page here, Stelios.
Yes, there's an interesting phenomenon that happens socially with that. With those that do have the knowledge and maintain it and hide it, or do not make it clearly known. You see, because the definition of a genius is someone who can explain the obvious in simple terms and anyone can understand it. When they put a scientist in front of you with complex formulas and language that people don't understand, that is not genius. That is there to hide something or confuse you or allow you to compartmentalize that information so you can reject it or not allow it to come in. What happens though, whether it's political, scientific, religious, when this base knowledge is withdrawn from the people's behavior change. They become less civilized, for example. Like, for example, you live in a society, it doesn't mean that it's civilized, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Civilization is not, is an aspect of society or a level of a society can reach. So what happens is these small groups of people that hold this information back, they notice the main population starts to change its behavior and become more, let's say, the common term would be barbaric or violent or ignorant. And the more ignorant or barbaric the population becomes, those that have the power and the knowledge become more oppressive and more separatist. They say, look at them, how dangerous they are, they need to be controlled. But if they had shared the information, given the information, that would have not happened. But then becomes a vicious cycle, because the more they withdraw the information, the worse the society gets, and then the more oppression and control has to be put on them, you see?
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happening. If you look at the general level of intelligence or whatever, ability to understand, it's rapidly decreasing. So it's what you're describing is what I what I see happening dramatically. When we look at the level of television, for instance, I remember when I was a child, I was a student. Level was much higher than nowadays because it's becoming totally stupid, totally zero content. So it's really alarming.
Yes, I usually give, when I speak to someone that I haven't met before, let's say, I have three things to describe the current state of humanity, perhaps four if we have time. These three things have five aspects to them. If I can just go through them, it might also help with a good introduction of where this thought process can go.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. The first aspect is you understand that when a woman is pregnant and she has come to full term, full gestation, over 9 months, let's say, that child needs to be born. If the woman does not bear the child and expel it from her body, and it's kept in her body for much longer, she can experience what's called toxemia, where her body becomes very stressed and the baby now becomes a deadly poison to her. And that can also, the mother can die and the baby can die, right, if she does not expel the child. Mm-hmm. Another example would be, you understand there are certain manufacturing processes, like, for example, the manufacture of solar panels or certain metal alloys like titanium. When you produce, let's say, 1 pound of solar panel, you have 2 pounds of toxic waste. There's a toxic side effect of certain manufacturing processes. So one might want to ask the question, is the manufacturing of human beings leave a society with toxic side effects? You see, if you look at human beings being in an evolutionary state, not an evolution as the way Darwin says, but in an evolutionary state where you actually are growing or manufacturing a being. Okay? That would be one thing to consider. The next thing to consider would be when you are going into the wilderness, for example, into a natural state, whether it's a forest or a desert, with the intention of building a village or a town. You have to go in first and clear an area because it is a wild area, let's say, right? Mm-hmm. And you level it and you make a plan and you then start to build your village. When you look at the nearby planets in the solar system, the Moon, the Mars, Venus, Mercury, you see barren planets. And the scientists tell you all of those features on the planets are impact craters. Now, wait a second. When a small object impacts a larger object at velocity, it usually leaves a parabolic bowl shape on the surface. If you look at most of the features on the nearby Moon, Mars, Venus, Mercury, there are some of these impacts, but most of these features, they are not impact craters. You'll see the surface is still round and maintained untouched, but a round rim blown around, and a center peak. Could it be that was, let's say, an electrical discharge? Could it be a neutrally charged plasma that when it hits the surface becomes positively charged that forms that feature on the planet? And isn't it unusual when you see how all of these barren planets are around us and then you see this beautiful blue marble they call the Earth? with all of this life on it. Do you see that? Okay.
Yes.
Something to consider. And I'm saying these things in a way that these are all common things that we can maybe reconsider and reapply to our existence. I just find it very unusual that all the planets around us have been cleared away, and when we are so unique. And they have been cleared away in a fashion that is not exactly how it's described to us. Because if you again look at the features on the planets, they are not impact craters at all. The majority of them. The third aspect is, let's say, for example, you are going to rent or lease a piece of property, and you have 1 billion roommates or 7 billion roommates. And they send you to meet the landlord and to sign the lease agreement so you can take control of the property. Now you go to the landlord and you see the lease, and it's about 1,000 pages long with all of these terms and conditions. And you make the agreement and you come back, but you don't tell any of your 1 billion or 7 billion roommates any of the terms and conditions. And everyone goes off and doesn't know the terms and conditions and is doing what they want. And some things that they do might follow the terms and conditions, but many others don't. And then your roommates or the people you're sharing the property with are wondering why the water is being turned off, why the power is being turned off, and why there's an eviction notice. Or why, but you have not told them the terms, you see. Could that be another way to look at our existence here?
It's an interesting thought. Would you like to go into that, or you want to first finish the? Yeah.
Absolutely. So those are 5 aspects of 3 aspects with 5 components to them. When you look at that, for example, if you look again at the ancient texts are there to give us a high vantage point. What I mean by that is, let's say there is a celebration or a holiday in a city and you have a parade. Okay? And there are people on the sidewalk, and they see the floats, they call them, they go down the street. Okay? All of the procession. And let's say it's a 4-hour long parade, and you're there with your friends, and you say, look at this one, look at that one, and they start guessing what the last float is going to look like. What is the last object in the parade? Well, that's 3 hours from now, let's say. You have to wait on the sidewalk and see when it comes by, if you're going to make a bet or a prediction. Or, if you have a friend in a helicopter, and you have a cell phone, and he has a cell phone, you can call him up in the helicopter, and he can see the beginning of the parade and the end of the parade all in one shot. You see? And he tells you, for example, the last float in the parade is going to be a pink elephant with a green hat. So you say, thank you very much. You tell all your friends around you, well, in 3 hours you're going to see the last float is a pink elephant with a green hat. And everyone around you say, oh, that's ridiculous. No such thing. No. Well, 3 hours go by, and here comes the pink elephant with the green hat. Now, are you psychic? Absolutely not. Do you have access to information that has a high vantage point that can see the beginning and the end at one time? Absolutely. So, can a helicopter be a time machine? Absolutely. You see? So, these ancient texts give us a perspective from a high vantage point. Now, of course, I found to make a criticism on the inhabitants of the earth right now, it's not that they're ignorant or not intelligent. It's they're very stubborn and rebellious. There's a difference, you see. So when you start speaking of these ancient texts, the first thing is, I'm not religious. I don't want to hear it. Or I don't believe that, or that was written by man, or whatever. They don't go and check the information, you see. So when you check the information of the ancient texts, they're all in agreement. But the followers of these ancient texts that follow religions are not in agreement. Right?
No, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so there's many interesting points. For example, if you take the book, the Bible, in the first verse, in English, it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. I think there are 10 words there. If you go back to the original Hebrew, you're going to see, Bereshith bara Elohim et ha-shemayim ve'et ha'aretz. You're going to see 7 words there. So someone's going to say, well, they added 3. Well, no, they actually added 4 because they took one away. They're not translating one of the words there. Because when you look at, for example, in the first verse of the Bible, you say, it actually would say, beginnings created Elohim. Elohim would be the mighty ones. It's plural. The Aleph Tav, and the heavens and the earth. Now, what they're not translating in any translation is, in the beginning, Elohim, the mighty ones, created the Aleph Tav. They translate the heavens and the earth, but they don't translate the Aleph Tav. The Aleph Tav, Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and Tav is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Or you can say the A and the Z, or you can say in Greek the Alpha and the Omega.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you go to, let's say, the book of John, it says, in the beginning, which means Bereshith, beginning, which is Genesis, was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God was the Word. Now, someone in the Bible describes himself as being the Aleph Tav, or the Alpha and the Omega. He says, I am the Word, I am the Alpha and the Omega. You see? Mm-hmm. And he's right there in the first verse of Genesis, but you will never see it in an English translation. Now, why am I giving this as an example? Because now we created a loop. When you see the information in the first verse, you really don't get a definition until you go more towards the end of the book, and it brings you back, and it's all connected, like tendrils or roots of a tree, how they spread out, but they all come from the same. So these books, these ancient texts, are preserved, even today, in mostly their original form. And not only are they preserved in their original form, they are written on what I would call a 30 or 40th grade level. Like, for example, education is rated from kindergarten through 12th grade high school, and then 16th grade would be bachelor's degree, 18th grade would be master's, and 20th grade would be PhD, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these books are written on a very high level. Now, when you, like you mentioned earlier, how everything is getting stupid in television, today, even someone graduating from college is really 8th grade level or 6th grade level from 100 years ago. So their ability to take current knowledge or current level of education and go and look at these ancient texts, the gap is even becoming more and more wide, and they're less and less easy to understand. So my point here is, if you look at any of the ancient texts, you will find that there is information that brings you back around. Within the texts always define themselves. You don't need to go outside of the text. And the purpose of the text is to give 3 things. One is to give you an operating program. Like when you buy a computer and you plug it in, it's just blinking. You have to put in the operating system, whether it's an Apple or a Microsoft, right? The main operating system disk.
Mm-hmm.
Before you can process. The second thing these ancient texts do is they give you a set of laws from a high vantage point. When I say laws, I mean what to eat, what to wear, how to farm, how to do business, how to treat your family, how to treat your neighbor. You see, all of these laws. I'm not talking traffic laws. Even though you can find that in the behavior aspect. And the third aspect is to show you what's to come.
Mm-hmm.
And all 3 aspects can be proven of that. So, because the interesting aspect of it is even if you don't want to adhere to any of these texts or understand them or follow them, you're going to anyway. Because if you look at, for example, all of the secular culture and secular rules and secular science, they're still based on information that is in these texts and documents.
Okay.
So, you see, so you cannot, it's not that you're escaping it, is it possible that humanity is being manufactured right now? And there are toxic side effects. Is it possible that this part of the solar system was cleared so we can have the very habitable planet where we are right now? And also, is it possible that these very important agreements in terms of being stewards on this planet are being withheld from the many? The irony, though, is the many do have access to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no one is reading it.
No. They lack time, they lack interest, they lack energy.
Correct.
Yeah.
And also, when you look at these ancient texts and you look at science, current science, very carefully, you'll see they're also in agreement. But on the surface, they're not. You see, I'll give you another example. Like in the very Orthodox Christians, when I say Orthodox, meaning they adhere to Christian principles, they always say, well, creation happened 6,000 years ago. You've heard that possibly.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And that is one of the main contentions between them and the scientific community. That doesn't make any sense, because when you look at the biblical definition of time, it says that one day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is a day. So, for example, you have the 7 days of creation, that's 7,000 years. And you have a character called Adam that came on the 6,000th year. And that was roughly 6,000 years ago. So the first chapter of Genesis has a minimum of 12,000 years. But in the first verse, everything was created. In the second verse, it says everything became weltered and wasted. And then it had to be remade. So there's an undisclosed period of time there. It could be in the millions. Actually, there are some very good Hebrew scholars that have shown a 4.5 to 5 billion a year time period between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 based on the numerology of the letters. So when you start saying that the Bible possibly shows 4.5, 5 billion years in the first two verses, and then 12,000 years ago there was a big cataclysm, is science in agreement with that? Sure.
Science is, yes.
They do say 9,500 to 13,000 years ago there was a major solar system-wide cataclysm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So where the Orthodox version of creation that Christianity professes, being everything was created 6,000 years ago, where did they get that from? Because it's not in the text.
No, it's not a genuine interpretation. It's just
it's not even an interpretation. It's completely foreign and accepted.
Yes.
It's debased.
It's a dogma, yeah.
And it's debased. It's not based on anything, is it? Well,
No.
It could be based on an idea that someone had and everyone decided to follow. Give you another example. Like, for example, in the Christian faith, they celebrate December 25th as the birth of Jesus Christ. I'm using their terminology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And almost everyone knows that is a traditional aspect, because no one really knows when. Well, I can show you a place in the Bible where you can see when the character known as the Christ was born down to the minute, accuracy, and the day. And if you go to the book Revelation, chapter 12, you will see an astronomical sign. It says there was a virgin about to give birth. I'm paraphrasing here. She had 12 stars at her head. She was cloaked with the sun, with the moon at her feet. Whoa, wait a second. That is the constellation Virgo, with the sun on her chest and the moon at her feet. So that means it's in the late afternoon, sundown. And the moon is only there in the west in the middle of the month. So that is an astronomical alignment, which is extremely precise, by the way. Astronomical alignments are very, very precise.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when anyone sees this, they need to go to an astronomical observatory where they have the proper computers for this. And I recommend you go to what they call a planetarium, where they do the shows, the laser shows on the ceilings at night, because those guys are there all day. They have nothing to do, right? So you give them the information, and they'll say, well, yeah, this happens X amount of years. It happens every 14 years here. It happens every 7 years here. It happens every 10 years here. When do you want to know? And you say, well, if we look at the text, you know the concept of triangulation. You have 2 points, you find the third. If you look at the New Testament, it says that we know that was the year that Caesar proclaimed a census of the empire. And we find secular records show us it's between 2 and 6 BC. And also we know that Herod the Great died 2.5 years after that time. Again, secular records show it's between 2 and 8 BC. So you go to the astronomical observatory and the computer, tell them, when does this event happen, according to the Gregorian calendar, the modern calendar now, between 2 and 6 or 2 and 8 BC? Do you have anything? And they come back and they do their thing, you know. The computer has all of these alignments. It can produce the alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, yes, we do. And it says, what is it? It's September 11th, 3 BC.
You're kidding.
No.
Whoa.
And it's around 6:40 p.m. And if you look biblically, it would be the 15th day of the 7th month, which is the day of tabernacle, because he says he came to set his tabernacle amongst us. Now, have you ever heard of the term September 11th before?
Yeah, I think I've heard a couple of times.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, is it possible that someone has this information and we don't know it?
It's very well possible, yes.
Now, is it possible that the Christ in the text, whether you believe it or not or know it or not, go look it up. He says, think not I came to unite. I came to divide with the sword. Father against son, daughter against mother-in-law, brother against brother. And in another verse he says, I will bring terror upon you. Now, is this the Christ that is projected in religious circles?
No.
Yes, thank you. Another aspect would be the nativity scene where they show the 3 wise men in the manger and all that, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you read the text, we don't know how many there were. We knew there was more than 2. But we know that they came to him when he was in his father's workshop he was around 2 years old. Mm-hmm. So are we talking about the same thing here? This is the text. This has nothing to do with what I believe in, what you believe in, what anyone should believe in. I'm talking about when we look at the text. You see, and here we have billions of people they say with their own volition, with their own mouth, their faith is based on this text. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, really?
No, I think you've got a point here, Stelios. Yeah.
Now, I'm not any more intelligent or less intelligent than anyone else. We already established we all have the same intelligence.
Whoa. Time is running out and I have so many questions, so I don't know where to start. What is your idea? Where, for instance, who wrote, the ancient, the Old Testament, for instance?
Very easy. For example, when you look at the first 5 books of Moses, for example, they came 2,500 years after. There are books older than that, let's say the book of Job.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a specific order there. Who wrote it? Let's say man wrote it, just like you would dictate to a secretary. Right? Who wrote that? Well, my secretary wrote that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we have a being that is intelligent enough to design, build everything, and are they intelligent enough to communicate to us? You see? So was it written by man? Absolutely. You can see the writing. It was written by man. Is it a form of dictation? Absolutely. Even in modern history, you hear of people who have quote-unquote channeled information and they wrote it down. Mm-hmm. The reason you write something down is to memorialize it in written form. You can memorialize in oral form. There are many traditions in many countries of the world that still retain oral memorialization, like the ancient Greeks when with their iambic pentameter. Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey to be oral.
Mm-hmm.
A certain rhythm, and the information was retained.
Yeah, and the same is true for the Gilgamesh epos that was given many generations long, just orally, not by written down, because it had rhyming, so it was like a verse to be proclaimed.
With the original texts of preservation, which would currently today is the Hebrew and the Greek, you will find there's series of number and logical formations underneath the text that adhere the text. And it's an error correction system. I'm not talking about the Bible code you've heard of where they take diagonal cuts through the text and they come up with predictions, right? You've seen that aspect?
Yeah, I think, but it doesn't feel good for me.
Because I had once downloaded this program and I pulled up predictions and I showed them to someone. They see the Bible code works. I said, well, the program works, but is it valid for the Bible code? And they say, what do you mean? I said, I did all this from the book Moby Dick. And I got...
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So, again, we don't have a lot of time, and I touched on these points because in the future, this topic that we're basically talking about, the spiritual aspect, the body, the soul, and the ancient text, there is going to be a big revival in the next decade or so to go back to adhere to these ancient texts or what people allegedly say they subscribe to. And when that happens, your current institutions that are in place will no longer be able to stand. And also the people and the scholars in these institutions will not have any answers.
No.
Obviously. In other words, do you remember back in the 50s and 60s, everyone wore a hat. All the men wore hats before, and they wore jackets, right?
Yeah.
Look at the movies from 50 years ago. Everybody wore a hat. Well, they say here in the U.S., John F. Kennedy was the first president not to wear a hat, and everyone wanted to be fashionable, so the men stopped wearing hats. What happened to all the hat shops? You had a hat shop in every corner.
Yeah, they had to search for another business.
Thank you. How many Christians do you know or heard of that know that the Christ was born on September 11th, 3 BC, according to their own text? And it's in.
Yeah, I don't think anyone
can validate himself. Anyone can validate, and I don't like to give opinion. I'd like to share information that can be validated.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You mentioned briefly, you mentioned that we are in some kind of manufacturing process. Have you any idea what we will become as mankind?
Absolutely. We are part of a family. And it's very clear in the ancient texts that the mighty ones, we call them gods, are a family. Right? They are men and women. If you read, for example, in the writings, I believe it's in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, that wisdom is a woman and she's a spouse. Okay?
And
we have other characters that are both male and female that are not benevolent. They're malevolent. For example, all of your military ranking on Earth, you have general, colonel, admiral, going down to the private. That is not something man invented. That is a copy of the other realm, you see. Also.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You are in the military part of the universe. Let's just say for now the universe is divided into 24 sectors. And this particular one is the war aspect of it. In other words, you're in the middle of a cosmic war. What are we going to become is we're going to join the family of these mighty ones. But can you give the analogy of the caterpillar forming a chrysalis and becoming a butterfly? And can you give the example of a full metamorphosis? You see? And will we still retain an anthropomorphic aspect? Absolutely. Because when you read in the ancient texts, these mighty ones are gods. They like planting gardens. They like drinking wine. You know, they planted the Garden of Eden, do you see? They're called a wine press. You see, they have very much the stuff. We are a reflection, as above, so below.
Exactly. It's a kind of mirror. Yeah.
And we're in a very, very special location. Again, I urge anyone and everyone to look at the nearby planets and look at how barren they are, and then look at how lush and beautiful the Earth is comparatively. And does that look natural or is it artificial? And let me just finish off maybe by saying this, that everything is artificial. Nature itself is artificial because by definition, in order for something to be artificial, it must have an artificer or an artist or a creator to make it. So the problem is not sharing the information or giving the information. The problem is how does one get over the stubbornness and the rebelliousness of the people to see it?
Yeah, some expect some big events to happen, and maybe people will become more curious than they are now and start to redo their homework.
Exactly. But you're going to have to really do your homework, not copy someone else's.
No, that's what I've learned too. And it's also the process of studying that helps you, to become or to do the transformation, the inner transformation. So it's not, you can't cheat with this, for instance. You have to do your own process.
Yes. So in essence, everything is the way it's supposed to be, lawfully, according to the laws of nature. Is there suffering? Yes. The only reason we consider it evil and suffering is because we don't understand it. But if we understood it, would we be in such a miserable condition on the earth right now? No. But on the other hand, if you go study the medieval ages, around the year 800 to the year 1000, almost 3/4 of the population of Europe was eliminated through plague and natural disaster. So currently, where you are on the planet, even though it is the credits part of the movie, when a movie ends, you still have the film rolling, you have credits. Basically, the Earth is a paradise comparatively to how it was in the past. Even with all the environmentalists saying we're destroying the environment and global warming, the level of to habitate the Earth right now is almost like paradise compared to how. Do some research and you can see. So there are many good points, and I don't think that the heat comes from cold and it goes back to cold. You have the good and the bad goes back to good. Positive, negative, positive.
Yeah, it's an ongoing cycle.
So again, I would urge anyone listening, if you believe in something, or if you know something that is based allegedly on something else, whether it's a body of knowledge or something material, do 5 minutes of homework to see is it truly based or debased at this point.
And how can I do that? Because I don't think everybody speaks the original languages. I think you speak a lot of languages, Hebrew and perhaps Greek too, and maybe even more. But how can you study the original writings from the ancients?
The work already has been done. You have what's called interlinears, where you have the language of your choice, and then below it the original languages of preservation.
Okay.
And then you can actually see what each word means. The beauty of these of Greek and Hebrew, though, is that you don't really need a dictionary. If you know what the letters mean, you could figure out what the word means.
Yeah, but then you have a word, but then you have to also find the meaning of the word, interpretation of those letters.
Yes, but also remember, in interpretation, there is only one interpretation. There are many translations and many versions. For example, when an ambassador goes to the UN from Japan, he has to bring an interpreter. And that is to make the effort to interpret from Japanese to English, let's say, in the most precise way possible. There's only one interpretation that uses accuracy and precision. But you don't have versions, you have versions. Don't believe me, it says it right on the books you have. This is hearsay.
The quality of the connection is not too good, Stelios. A lot of words are not coming over. At least I don't hear them. I hope the listeners do hear them. So maybe you can repeat the last remark, if you want.
Yes, interpret. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, but sometimes it's soft and it's coming back again.
An interpretation must be accurate and precise, where a version is basically hearsay.
Okay. Yeah. So we should find solid ground to put our belief system or our understanding on.
Yes, whether it's scientific, medical, mathematical. If you read all of your scientific books, it doesn't say anything ever is. It says it appears to be. You ever notice that?
I've not noticed it, but it doesn't. Yeah, it's not a surprise to me. Yeah, we're actually doing the same kind of work, but we come from different directions. You really go to the foundation, the writings, and that's why I invited you for the show, because I've not met anyone who was so thoroughly on that subject. So I think I will have to ask you to come again to the radio show, Stelios, because we've only touched a lot of issues, but I think there's much more to discuss.
Sure, and so anyone and everyone can understand it. If an 8-year-old in the room cannot understand what you're saying, you're not saying it right.
Exactly, that's what I also say. I wrote a lot of books, mostly in Dutch, and every time that's what I try to explain to people. It's in the simplicity, and if you make it complex, then you only put sand in the people's eyes. That's the story of Hans Christian Andersen, the fairy tale of the emperor who wears no clothes, but nobody can see it because they are blinded with all kinds of not real issues. But a little child is able to see the truth. So that's what we should do, I think.
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stelios, for being my guest. I'll contact you to ask you to come back one more time, or maybe even more times. So thank you very much for being my guest. All the listeners, thank you very much for listening, and hope that you join the radio show next time. Bye bye.
Even though I can't explain, more than a dream that you are reaching, more than a laugh that shadows all the pain. A special meaning in the thorn of dreams, in the garden where a thought can blind me. 'Cause I am lost here, where it never gleams, where I found that I scream so blindly. Yeah, until I rise up, fall down. Is this the reason that I can't feel the ground? Am I waiting for my tomorrow, or should I say goodbye? Yeah. Well, am I walking with a purpose? 'Cause I feel the same. And as I wait for my dreams to surface, as I wait I'm drowning in the rain. Just when I thought that it was over, I lost my grip and I hit the wall. A simple dream that I tripped over. Now I have to wake up to my fall, until I rise up, fall down. Is this the reason that I can't feel the ground? Am I waiting for my tomorrow, or should I say goodbye?
Dit is Ergens Over Radio.